Don't fear the numbers, don't fear the notes. They're not just paperwork, they're really, truly proof that you're doing the work, you're learning, you're growing. If you are new here, my name is Lauren Gutierrez. I am a clinical social worker and board-approved supervisor in the state of Texas, and I've been doing this type of work since 2009, if you can believe it. I absolutely love social work. And so I'm leaning into that space of truly molding and shaping and giving the insights and hopefully building the confidence in future social workers so that they can continue to do what I feel is an essential part of our society. So as I step into my role as a field coordinator, which basically this is the person that assigns soon to be future social workers into their field slash practicum slash internship opportunities. These internships are no joke. They are absolutely no joke. They are 250 hours each semester. So it's about 450 hours a year. And it is truly full force. There is a lot of documentation that goes into it, educational agreements, a lot of moving parts. And so I coordinate all of it. And I have been sharing some insights and resources, things of that nature here on my YouTube channel, also on the podcast for Social Work Scrapbook. This space, Social Work Scrapbook, honestly turns into a video diary, so to speak, and also just a scrapbook of my experiences as I evolve as a social worker. I started off in school social work. I went to foster care social work. I also worked in juvenile probation, also clinical social work, all the things. I love all these spaces. And recently within my new role, I have been challenged to go back to the beginning, back to my own internship. And I wasn't a person that knew anything about social work. And so that it was just an interesting experience, kind of stepping blindly, in a sense, into this social work world and internships and placements and practicums and education plans and process recordings. And as I'm saying all this, I know that I'm triggering some of y'all that have been here since the very beginning watching my videos that are already seasoned social workers. I follow y'all too. I love it so much. And I had a message from someone that said, I'm just glad, quote unquote, I'm just glad to be done with internship paperwork. Like, I am traumatized by that experience, and I totally get it. And here's a little bit of truth as well, because as I read that, I'm like, yes, I feel it. However, the notes, they never stop. The documentation, the push and pull, it never stops. Whether you're in school social work, a hospital setting, or a clinic, you're your own boss as an LCSW, documentation is kind of like the soundtrack of all of our work. It's always playing whether you like it or not. It's one of those things, right? So today we're going to talk about why numbers and notes aren't the enemy, and how documenting can actually help us to advocate for ourselves, help us to lean into our why. And I also want to share why our internship experiences are way more transferable than we give them credit for. Even if all you think you've done is colored with some students, play Jenga. So as a school social worker, no shade to Jenga. All the insert your favorite board game here, Uno. Don't like that one. I'm the type that always lets somebody win. I'm that person. I quickly realized that in documenting, in my notes, in my case note strategy, it really wasn't about the why behind students' needs. It wasn't about all the details. And I think we can get flustered here when we're writing case notes or documenting. There's different notes for different settings. And in school social work, it's almost the most lax. So that might give you just a little peace of mind if you're going into that field. The documentation in school social work is really about the what, your deliverables. What services are students and families needing? What tools do they need? What type of food? What type of clothing? Where are the gaps that are keeping a student, a family, from truly living up to their potential academically and in school? And so when I saw it this way, and I know a lot of other social workers are in different fields and realms, right? I mentioned LCSWs, maybe working privately or in clinics and in hospitals, documentation looks different for social workers in different settings. And it comes with a very high stress level. I know that. But this kind of like bird's eye view within school social work, documentation wasn't ever too hefty. It wasn't too much of a burden because we focused so much on those deliverables and those services. Because here's the kicker, the numbers, they really do matter. As much as we have this hate type of relationship with documenting, it's the numbers that we have to truly fall in love with, because this is how we get our donations, we get our grants. This is how we can even advocate for more social workers in systems that are flawed, that have these huge gaps, and we know that they're there. So the world talks in numbers. It just does. I think the majority of us are a little scared of those numbers. I used to be. I know that, because how can you really measure numerically the work that we do? It's like a fish out of water. You take it out of the water, you don't see its strength and its beauty, and it will look like a very scary sight. I feel like that's how social work is. When you put numbers on us, we feel really restricted. We start to kind of get a little bogged down because we are working within systems where we often don't see the change that we are making. However, we are making change. And I feel like this is why we shy away from numbers and documentation. It is super stressful. Most days, it feels like the odds are stacked up against us. Let's just be honest. But here's what I learned. Numbers aren't just data. They can be really powerful tools for us to advocate for ourselves, for our role, and also the needs of our community, our students, our clients. So I think rather than shy away from numbers, we truly have to lean into them. And I shared my quick tip over on Instagram and on YouTube Shorts as well, as far as my hacks, like the little shortcuts that I take to make this numbers game work for me, my documentation, my notations, those types of things. Because I realized that once you're done with your internship, you kind of just want to be done with the documentation, right? Those progress notes, all of that kind of stuff. But as a professional, that documentation doesn't change. So the better you get at it, the easier your transition into the profession your transition into the profession will be. It's no longer just about passing and filling up timesheets just for your liaison or for your practicum. It's about advocacy. It's about patterns. It's about self-preservation. So in my previous district where I worked at, these numbers were utilized to advocate for more social work roles. At one point, man, were we so fortunate, but not really, because it was hard work to document everything that we did. But at one point, we had a school social worker on every single campus in our district. That was the heyday to be around that district, because we worked together. We were holistically providing for our parents and our students. It was beautiful. So numbers can really, really help in that way. And then framing notes, not as something to cover your behind, but as proof for those staffing needs, as proof for the funding and that recognition that social workers truly do deserve. One listener shared here, and I just want to go back to this audience comment that I had on my last podcast and YouTube video. And it was a beautiful comment, because my last video was all about how to avoid rookie mistakes in your internship or placement. It's a big question that I get, like, what advice would you have given or wanted yourself when you were first starting out? And so, like I shared, it forces me to really go back and think of those things. But I'm glad that Tiffany found this helpful, because she said that she's already working, right? But she found the video helpful because, Tiffany states, every day I am nervous because there are so many challenges to overcome. And this was such a great way to help me reframe. I always have to remind myself that this is what I want, and the challenges are a part of the process of getting where I want to go. And she writes, thank you. And I want to thank her as well, because our nerves, whenever we're nervous about something, and I spoke to this longer in the video, I will link it in the show notes here and down below if you want to give that a listen, is that those nerves just mean that we truly do care. Documentation makes us nervous. It stresses us out. For some of us, we get burned out even thinking about the loads and loads of documentation that we have to do. It truly is something we need to lean into because it can become a tool to help us step into our best selves. And even, especially when things are very overwhelming. I have used documentation in the past to also show that I couldn't take on more than what was placed on my plate. So if you want me doing as a social worker, as a school social worker at that time, A, B, and C, now you want to add D and E? Well, we need to renegotiate and realign here. Then someone, right? We're talking about delegating out some of these responsibilities because I can't do A through F all by myself. And that documentation shows just how much I would spend, for example, on A and B and C, and how adding D, E, and F is not going to be sustainable, is not the best use of my time, and how we maybe need to shift A to the attendance department and B to the trying to think of something that starts with B. And so I guess I'm losing my touch. I can't think of a B word right now, but you can see what I mean as far as your documentation is going to show and kind of allow you to lean into the things that you want to do, that you're better at, that you're good at, that you need social work's clinical skills maybe to do. And this kind of walks me into another listener comment. And I want to kind of start here, but I will tell you right now, I have an idea for so many series when I got this comment from, it was it the first comment? I think it was the first comment. She says, what would you recommend for someone like me who has a master's in clinical social work but only has field experience in school settings? My university only found schools for me to complete my internship. And even if I loved the experience and learned a lot, she's a little worried. She writes that she's worried it will limit my opportunities in the future. I'm trying to read a lot and watch simulations of clinical interventions online, but I don't know if that will be enough to apply for a job in a clinical setting. And that is, I think, something that a lot of us contend with. The idea of if my experience and my expertise, my niche, my population of choice is A, then how do I pivot, right? Especially school-based skills and school social workers. We wonder and we almost have this imposter syndrome, even if we have that clinical license, that we're not able to pivot to clinical practice. And I just want to share that the skills you build in school social work positions are totally transferable into the clinical space. So that being said, our notes, right? The notes, the documentation that we take every day, it might look like handing out school supplies. We might feel because these tasks are more day to day as far as handing out supplies or donations and things like that, home visits, that it's not clinical in nature. But I promise you, you can create a niche where there is some clinical counseling guidance into your day as a school-based social worker, counselor. In fact, that's something that we see trending. If you don't have that clinical knowledge, you may likely be deer in the headlights as you enter into the school space because there is so much need for mental health resources that you're naturally going to be leaned upon for suicide assessments, interventions, guidance. Your documentation is going to show that you are not just passing out pencils to students that don't have any. You are truly using assessment and solution-based counseling. You're coordinating resources. You're truly supporting a client, the student, holistically. And not just the client, I'm sure you're also supporting the family, the teachers, so adults as well. Those are clinical skills. So your skills are transferable and your notes, your documentation is proof of that. So I'm going to be doing a video series around this topic very soon. I'm wanting to kind of share that school-based internships or that school-based foundation that you may have, let's call it a foundation, can truly step you into clinical practice without a hitch, seamlessly. And I want to create a roadmap for you to be able to do that because I did that very seamlessly and I think it just worked hand in hand. So it's really the bridge that you are on, I feel, if you're a school-based counselor or social worker, to step into that clinical space just beautifully. So anyway, if you're in need of a quick tool, I have a few on my YouTube channel right now and Teachers Be Teachers. And so for those that are in the school space, I have some downloadable spreadsheets included in here as I'm on the topic of documentation to help you track your caseload. It works perfectly within schools because that's where I was. Because the notes truly, they never stop, but they can work for you, as I hope I have convinced you of, to take that fear out of the documentation piece because you can really get a good snapshot, a good picture of what you're truly doing. So the more you document, the more visible the needs are and the clearer the patterns are and the more advocacy eventually we will be able to do. So you're not just checking boxes. I promise you're making an impact. I'm going to link one more video if you want to document with me. This is a pretty lengthy video where we just document together, right? Stay tuned for upcoming roadmap video that I mentioned, that series. And remember, your notes aren't busy work. They're your advocacy, they're your growth, and it's truly your story. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Till next time, I'm wishing you social work success. Make sure you subscribe if you found this helpful, share it with another, and I'll talk to you soon.